My values have not changed.
What are the chances that Beryl had her own baby named Donald in 1938, and then was also in attendance of the passing of a baby named Donald Harris in 1940?
Whoa, what is going on here?
And here's my question. If you're watching this and you are a committed Kamala voter, my genuine question would be, if you found out that she essentially lied about her entire background and she stole somebody else's grandmother and pretended that this was her grandmother, would you change your mind about Kamala Harris?
What is up, guys? Tyson Dela Cruz here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. Guys, I'm telling you, you're going to want to buckle up for this one because Candace Owens exposes an entire heritage of potential lies. Candace Owens has been on a full expose of discovering what the heck is actually going on with Kamala Harris's dad, supposed grandma, her family history. It is shocking. She is doing a full deep dive, and I'm in shock. I am in shock. This is very reminiscent to one Barry Soetoro. If you're not familiar with Barry Soetoro, aka Barack Obama, look into that. Shout out to everybody watching. Drop your comments down below. Smash the like button. And let's see what Candace Owens has to say today on the terrifying history of Kamala Harris.
I don't even know where we begin here. I mean, I'm just shaken. So look, if you're just jumping into this, you got to stop and you got to go back 2 episodes and play catch up, episode 70 and episode 71, because we're not going to do too much recapping here because I want to jump right into this. Basically, someone came for Janet Jackson and I answered the door. It was a discrepancy that was in Kamala's book, a woman that she said was her grandmother named Beryl, a picture of her and her grandmother Beryl. Here it is, visiting my paternal grandmother Beryl in Jamaica. And then I did just a brief search online and found out that Beryl allegedly died 4 years before Kamala was born. So that's
how's
a
she in the
major
photo?
red flag.
Yeah.
Then I had a little bit of a gut instinct. The photos that were being presented of Kamala and her grandparents, great-grandmother and Beryl, I just felt that the women, or the woman, because I think they look remarkably alike, I just feel that maybe this woman was the help. And I'm not saying that because she's Black. I'm not racist against Black people. I am Black. I'm saying this because there's just a lack of emotion there. Like, I don't know if it's just my grandparents, or when they're with you, they're like super cuddly and cute. And this woman's just kind of very serious each time that she's being featured here. So anyways, what happened was we sourced Beryl's birth certificate. And then my instinct got a little bit stronger because her name was spelled differently in the birth certificate, right? So you see that it says Beryl spelled B-E-R-I-L, Magdalene. And we know for a fact, by the way, so people that are submitting other birth certificates, this is definitively the correct birth certificate because it says Iris Finnegan. And we know based on Kamala and Kamala's father, Donald J. Harris, that Iris Finnegan is the mother of Beryl. And then
isn't it crazy that Kamala's father, Donald J. Harris? What? It's like that scene from Batman and Superman. He's like, Batman has a mother named Martha, and so did Superman. Superman's mom's name was Martha as well.
Find him! Save Martha! Why did you say that name?
It's his mother's name. It's his mother's name.
Just random fact of the day, I guess.
We see that her name changes, the spelling of her name changes, rather, by the time that we looked at her marriage certificate. Suddenly you can see that the marriage certificate has her name being spelled with a Y. Now that to me signaled that maybe she definitely is the help, and I'll tell you why. So my grandfather, before he passed away, maybe like 10 years before he passed away, I got kind of obsessed with trying to find all of these documents pertaining to his life because I realized like that's my ancestry, and I was having a ton of trouble mining his grandmother's information because on each document, her name was spelled differently, as well as other people in the family. And I was like, Granddad, why is everyone's name spelled differently depending on the document? Like, this is very confusing. Why is it sometimes spelled Liza versus Eliza versus like Lisbeth? That was his grandmother's name. And he explained to me that they didn't know how to read and write. So you forget this. You forget that you had a world, the majority of people couldn't read and write, especially if you were not considered like a high class person. My grandfather grew up on a sharecropping farm. And so what that meant was, even if you had a name, if you couldn't read and write, you were going up to the register, whether it was for birth, whatever it was, and you were just telling somebody the name. You weren't saying like, hi, it's Candace, Candace. You're just saying Candace, and one person might spell it Candis, somebody might spell it Candice. If you do not know how to read and write, you don't recognize these discrepancies. So that actually, I thought, was a good thing in terms of like my idea that this woman could have potentially just been the help, maybe like on my scent. But I didn't want to be too convinced. Obviously, you know, I lean into the conspiracy mindset because we've been lied to so many times. But like I said, we did find that marriage certificate between Beryl and Lawford Newland, which was in July of 1944. And I want to be clear, guys, we know for a fact this is the correct Beryl. So we're not confused here and looking for more documentation when it comes to the birth or the marriage, because the correct parents are listed. You can see Patrick Finnegan is listed. And so we know that Beryl's parents are Iris Finnegan and Patrick Finnegan. So that is the correct parent, the correct marriage certificate. But we had no idea who Lawford Newland was. We had no idea that Beryl had allegedly been married after she birthed Donald Harris. That would be Kamala Harris's father. Thought that was like quite strange. She would have been 6 years old in 1944. Donald Harris was born in 1938. So this means that she got married to this guy, Lawford Newland, and she had a 6-year-old. So I thought that was quite strange. I couldn't find anything on Lawford Newland, but somebody on the team was able to determine that he arrived on a ship to New Orleans. He arrived in New Orleans, from Jamaica in May of 1943. So we're showing you here the ship manifest, and Lawford Newland is on the ship, and he is listed as, he's listed as a Negro. He's Black. It says his marital status is single. That would be correct, because this would have been a trip the year before he got married to Beryl. So quite strangely, he went to New Orleans, and then I guess he at some point had to have gone back just a year later to get married. We still have not been able to locate the relevant marriage certificate between Oscar Harris. Now that's, again, Kamala's dad. His father is Oscar Harris. We cannot find that marriage between Kamala's grandfather and Beryl. So that's like a huge question mark there, right? Like, where is that marriage certificate? If you guys find it, we're checking our emails, and we're obviously aware that there are a lot of different Beryls that are being born in Jamaica at different times. Some people are like, this could be the case of 2 Beryls, and they're sending us different birth certificates. Like I said, we know we have the correct birth certificate. We know we have the correct marriage certificate. We know for a fact that this Beryl did get married, and that Donald should have been 6 years old when she got married. So it begs the question, was this her second marriage? Did she have a child out of wedlock with Oscar Harris? Did she have Donald? And then did she get married? Because it lists her on her marriage certificate as a spinster, which means that she's not married, obviously. And then she gets married to Lawford Newland. And then at some point they would have had to divorce if she remarried and got married to Oscar. So she would have had to have gotten with him, had a child with him, married somebody else, divorced that somebody else, and then gotten back together with Oscar and gotten married. Like, that's like a lot of movement. Again, we don't have any documentation, so we're not going to speculate. But Beryl in general, I'm not describing her as the dog that's not barking, okay? So some people were saying, well, I've seen on different websites that there was also a Beryl Harris that died in 1995, and maybe this could potentially be her. We've done the math on that. No, that woman would have been born in 1914. Like I said, we know for a fact Beryl was born. The birth certificates are probably the most relevant source, because you obviously wouldn't have a birth certificate written years later after the fact that your child was born. It says that Beryl was born in 1917. But I started going back to that piece that Donald Harris wrote, remember the first time that we were kind of introduced to the fact that Kamala Harris was Black, it was because Donald Harris wrote this piece, which came right behind Kamala Harris's book, Reflections of a Jamaican Father. And I just would like to, by the way, really stress to you how Black he was trying to suddenly make them. Like, I'm just going to read you the first sentence of this by Donald J. Harris, Kamala's father. As a child growing up in Jamaica, I often heard it said by my parents and family friends, "Remember where you come from." Like this language, and I'm really going to call.
Sounds like Kamala Harris when she said this.
Well, look, you may not be a union member. You better thank a union member.
It's like slave dialect is littered all throughout this piece. Like he's very much trying to make this roots, you know, like I have no idea why he's using this kind of writing, like quite literally, member where, that's spelled W-H-E, you is spelled Y-U, which is like, why would you spell it like that? Like, how does he know when someone says you, they're saying Y-U, you know what I mean? And then cum from, like very strange all throughout. And then he goes on and he writes, my one big regret is that Kamala and her sister did not come to know very well the two most influential women in my life, Miss Christie and Miss Iris. Okay, so those are his grandparents, according to him. Those are both of his grandmothers, maternal and paternal. And then the whole piece is about his grandmother, his two grandmothers. And he wrote, both of my grandmothers had the strongest influence on my early upbringing. And then in parentheses, he writes, not to exclude, of course, the influence of my dear mother, Miss Beryl, and loving father, Mass Oscar. Like, I think it's supposed to be like Massa, like Mass Oscar. Very strange. Again, nobody that I know calls their mom Miss Beryl, calls their grandmother Miss Iris, and calls their other grandmother Miss Iris. There's something about that doesn't strike me as familial. But again, that's speculation. Doesn't matter. Maybe there is this strange family where everyone, like, they address their mom as Miss, and they address their grandmother as Miss, and they address their other grandmother as Miss. Like that, it really isn't up to us to make any conclusions. But that's that's the first and last time that he mentions his mother, Miss Beryl. Okay, which signals to me that my theory about her having died young, you're saying you're raised by your grandparents, but your mother is around, but you don't talk about your mother or speak about your mother at all in this entire piece, signals to me that this is correct and your mother died early, okay? You're not mentioning her for a reason. So then this gets crazy. I get an email. Actually, I got two emails, but this one in particular made me sit up straight in bed. Like, I'm not kidding. I was like about to fall asleep, and I just decided to check the email box, and I sat up. I sat up just like this and started texting everyone. And I woke my husband up. I was like, you have to read this email. This is completely crazy. It came all the way from New Zealand. Shout out to New Zealand. I'll be on tour there soon, you guys. Get out there, buy some tickets, because we're going to talk about this now. That's the only thing I'm going to speak about in New Zealand. But I'm going to just read this email to you because it's just incredible. Kia ora from New Zealand, Candace. My name is blank. And after your first podcast about the family of Kamala Harris yesterday, I went down the rabbit hole all day looking for photos of Beryl Finnegan Harris's brothers and sisters, as you asked. I was so intrigued and I wanted to take up your challenge. I could not find those photos, but I did come across a record that you might be interested in. I noticed on Kamala's birth certificate, you showed that her father, Donald Harris, was 26 at her birth in 1964, giving him a presumable birth year of 1938. That is correct. He was born in 1938. I'm just saying that as an aside. I came across the attached record of a one-year-old child who died in 1940 in St. Anne's Parish. This infant's name was Donald Harris. You will notice the baby's father's name that is given was Albert Harris, and there's no mother mentioned. However, you will be interested to notice that a person listed as present at the death of the child was none other than Beryl Harris. She has also signed the death record. What are the chances that Beryl had her own baby named Donald in 1938, and then was also in attendance of the passing of a baby named Donald Harris in 1940? Weird, right? And just to be clear, that we're going to show you that certificate because it would mean that there were two Donald Harris babies born that Beryl was around. One was hers and one, I don't know, guys. It's getting weird. I'm going to finish this email, then we're going to talk about it. I have looked for the infant's father, Albert Harris, and cannot find a lot about him. Albert's father name was Abraham Harris. I believe it is possible he was married to a Violet Fearon on the 6th of March, 1935. No record of her passing, so why was she not at her child's death? But Beryl Harris was. Was this baby Beryl's or Violet's? If Donald Harris passed 1 year old, who is the man claiming to be Kamala's father? Oh my gosh, chill. She wrote, make it make sense. I'll keep digging. Chills. I was like, what are you talking about? I opened this email so fast. It was crazy. And let me just show you the attachment. Chills. I'm freaking out. I'm freaking out all over again. It's hitting me. It's a second wave here of what? So yes, you will see that listed here. This is a death certificate that is on the 29th of November, 1940, okay, in St. Anne Parish. That obviously is where her family is from. And yes, the child's name was Donald Harris. The child died before the child turned 2. So this would mean that it is plausible that this child was born in 1938, the exact same year that Donald J. Harris, Kamala's father, was born. Okay, can you pull it back up? I'm not done reading through this. Okay, so you have also, it says the certified cause of death is fever and a cold. And it's letting you know, it says the duration of the illness, so that this baby was sick for 1 month, rest in peace. And it does mention that that baby is the son of Albert Harris. And just as this person speculates, it is signed by Beryl Harris, and it tells you, because you're supposed to include this, the signature of the person who was present at the death. And it says Beryl Harris, present at the death. And that is at Mount Moriah in St. Anne. Now, I want to be clear, there is no place to put the mother's name. So it's not like there's anything like strange here. I just think that if this is this Beryl's child, and this Beryl Harris was married to this Albert Harris, or together with this Albert Harris at some time, like that is the reason why it just says that present for the death. Like literally, who else would be present? If your child is dying less than 2 years old, okay, barely 2 years old, who would you allow to be there in your place? There's no mother on earth that would
Holy
be next to their child.
smokes.
So it is very heavily suggested that Beryl Harris was there for the presence of her son, Donald Harris, dying. And that would put that approximate birth of that baby at 1938. Stop the press. Stop
What?
the press. Okay? So you can imagine me. Now you're me sitting up straight. Like, what is going on here? Like, actually, what do I know about Kamala's father? Like, this could be a coincidence. I'm sure. Yeah, I guess you could have like a lot of Beryls that are giving birth to Donalds in the year 1938 in St. Anne Parish. Of course, like you have to consider every possibility here, but also consider that this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. Okay, so then I received a second email. Okay. Very interesting here. Very interesting here. And I'm just going to read the email. I'm just going to read the email and take you through this. What happens when I go through my info box? I tell you guys to message with deets. This email says, hi, Candace. See the death certificate below indicating that Beryl Christie was a domestic servant in 1936 when her infant daughter died. So there's another, and this person has written Beryl Christie and lost her daughter, and I'm going to pull it up here at the bottom of this email. She talks about like the birth dates. I'll get to that later. Do you guys have a close-up of this? Yeah. Okay. So you can see here, it is Beryl Christie. And this would mean not only did Beryl Christie lose a child in 1940, but prior to that, Beryl Christie lost a daughter in 1936. Okay. Again, all we have here is Beryl Christie. We know that this is potentially the right Beryl. Again, there could be another Beryl Christie going around. I don't want to completely close the door on that, but it is interesting. And I'll tell you why this struck me as incredibly interesting, because when we spoke about the death certificate yesterday, right, and we spoke about this young death of a woman, she's particularly died, Beryl Christie, of fibroids related to a hysterectomy. So if there is a Beryl Christie that had back-to-back, had lost children in some regard, you could imagine that she might have been injured internally. This is a long time ago. You would imagine that the procedures obviously, are not what they are today. And it is plausible that that woman died young of fibroids from a hysterectomy related to the fact that she had two troubling births, whatever it is, carrying children didn't work out for her. I just thought like, okay, but the big part about that second one is that we now know for a fact that there was a Beryl Christie that was in fact a domestic servant. Can you pull that back up again? Because I want to point that out so people can see this. The last one, the close up of it, if we can. You can see that she is listed as a domestic servant. That girl is listed as the daughter of Beryl Christie. You can see that in that where it says rank, profession, or occupation, daughter of Beryl Christie, domestic servant.
Oh,
I don't know, guys. I don't know, guys.
whoa.
Like I said, I'm trying to now, I'm putting in columns to
My
sort
jaw,
through the various Beryl Christies that were born around
my jaw is about to fall off. What do you guys think about this? Holy tamale.
this time. Like I said, you guys keep sending me stuff, but just to make sure you're filtering yourself, we know for a fact that Beryl Christie was born in 1917. We know for a fact that Beryl Christie got married in 1944 to Lawland Newford, or whatever his name is, Lawford Newland, pardon. And so we don't need a bunch of documents speculating that it could be a different birth, because her parents are listed, and Kamala and her father have confirmed that her parents are Iris and Patrick Finnegan. Okay. So we know those are the people that we are looking for. Oddly enough, though, because a lot of people have been pointing out the fact that in her birth certificate, even though we know that that's her mom, Iris, that's the mom's name, Iris Finnegan, it says Magdalene. And then suddenly it converts to Christie. Well, I just wanted to point out to you, because that was a question we were getting a lot, was why would she take on Christie? In Donald Harris's piece, he writes explicitly that Miss Iris, so that's Kamala's great grandmother, that her husband was known as Mr. Christie. So I'll read you that paragraph. It says, Miss Iris, mother of 8 children, I can't find 8 children, by the way, was the sweetest and gentlest person one could meet, but underneath it was a tough farming woman who ran the cane farm at Thatch Walk, jointly owned with her husband, Mr. Christie. So the reason she may have put Christie, or started using Christie as a middle name, is because that would mean that her father was being called Mr. Christie. Again, we are getting that directly from Donald J. Harris, who I'm now very interested in. I'm now very interested in this particular Donald J. Harris. Obviously, very easy way to debunk this, and maybe there really was just another Beryl Christie that happened to have a child named Donald in the same year from the same parish, would be to just take a look at Kamala's father's birth certificate. And we can't find that. We quite literally cannot find that. And I find that to be very strange. People were writing to me saying, hey, it looks like this was purposefully removed, that his birth certificate was removed. And I would just like to find it, because it would just kind of let me be at ease and know that there's nothing further to look at other than this child, because it's just a very, very strange thing. Okay, I also wanted to just go over everything we do know about Donald J. Harris, because I was interested in him suddenly. And the first thing is, he, according to him, like Miss Christie in this piece, is his paternal grandmother. He calls her Miss Christie. He acknowledges that they were descendants of the slave owner Hamilton Brown. And he is the founder of Brownstown. That's another thing that strikes me as very odd, and maybe there's something I'm missing here. But if you were a person that established a town and you had over 1,000 slaves, would you really just openly be married to some of these slaves? Like, is that something that would happen? I know that obviously they would have relations with the slaves, and that's something that is a reality. But in the way that they speak about their family, it's like they were just openly married with slave owners and slavers, which I find to be a little bit strange. As I said, he claims that Miss Christie owned and operated a dry goods store, and that she died in 1951 at the age of 70. Then we have Miss Iris, who he mentions. That's the maternal grandmother. We can actually get up this, we can get up the family tree so people can see this. He mentions Miss Iris, and that is the person that he completely fawns over. That's his maternal grandmother, Miss Iris. She was a farmer, an educator, he claims. And he also says, which I find to be quite strange. Remember, he says he has the strongest relationship with Miss Iris, doesn't even mention his mother, Beryl. By the way, these photos are the ones that have been provided by Kamala herself and her father. I cannot verify that these are accurate photos, but we're just going to use the ones that they're given. But what's quite strange is he says that Miss Iris's ancestry is unknown to him. So I guess they never had that conversation despite how close they are. Again, she jointly owned the farm with her husband, Mr. Christie, and he died in 1981 at the age of 93. Sorry, pardon. He says that she died at the age of 93 at the age of 1981. That's Miss Iris. Then you have Joseph Alexander Harris. Now that is the person who we are to understand that she was married to. The Harris name comes from his paternal grandfather, Joseph Alexander Harris. He was the landowner and the agricultural produce export. And he refers to the family property as Orange Hill. I think we need some Jamaicans to go out here and just start verifying stuff for me. And that Uncle Newton took over Orange Hill and started a limestone mining and brick producing operation in addition to cattle, grass, fruit, pimiento farming of earlier times. Now, again, I am just trying to understand how she came from a middle-class background. I mean, people that had slaves were super wealthy. It sounds like they always owned land, that they always potentially had servants. So I'm just trying to understand where this middle-class background comes from. My producer put in a note here that people in the live chat are saying that it's a Creole language that's native to Jamaica when he starts speaking in this tongue. Okay, I literally didn't know that. I'm sorry, but I just found that he was writing in this way, which I found to be quite strange. I felt like he was trying to sell to us that they were definitely Jamaican or they were like descended from slaves, and they had slaves. So obviously his family actually had slaves, thousands of slaves there. So I thought that he was trying to lean into the slave language. So I'll correct that if that's actually English Creole. That, yeah, I don't know if he was trying to write English Creole. I actually never knew that that was a language that was native to Jamaica, but I do find it very interesting that that's something that he included all throughout this piece. And I would question some of the spelling of things like, is Creole, do you actually spell Y-U for you? Or is he just trying to basically signal to us that this was his family? Anyways, literally did not know that. So you learn something new every single day. So I also had a ton of other people that introduced some other things that I was not aware of. And I'm just going to kind of go through other things that people brought up that I found to be very interesting. First and foremost, someone told me to take a look again at Kamala's birth certificate. Chris, I don't know if I told you to pull that, but going to her original birth certificate, yeah. So they said, this person emailed me and they were just like, okay, Candace, it is amended in the middle there. So you see there's a stamp in the middle of her birth certificate that says amended 1 of 2. And this person apparently was born in the exact same place as Kamala at the exact same time. He claims that his birth certificate is a different color. Okay, not a big deal. But he said that there was some change made on this birth certificate because it says amended 1 of 2. And so I looked that up because I was like, oh, I didn't even like recognize that. And it turns out that yes, in California and in other states, you can file to have your birth certificate amended if you want to change the name of the father, change the name of the mother, if there was some error, like maybe they spelled Kamala's name wrong and they wanted to change the spelling of her name, or if you just completed your adoption process is another reason in California that you are allowed to change the name or make an amendment, pardon. And so it is interesting that that does say amended 1 of 2. I don't know if this means that she amended it 2 times or what the deal is here, but that is something that is of note. And like I said, I'm trying to read through and sort through all of your emails and to prioritize which ones I think are relevant. And I just really think that looking into Donald Harris now is just something of interest to me, and like trying to figure out where he was born and learning a little bit more about his background, because there are some verifiable facts here that are just not correct, or at least if they are correct, I can't find them. I can't verify them. And I think it's fair, by the way, to investigate this, because this woman has suddenly leaned very into this idea that she's Black and she is running for president of the United States. So when you decide to run for the president of the United States, we have a right to fact check everything that you put into the public domain. And one thing that I could not check out was that didn't check out for me was the idea that Miss Iris had 8 children. None of the numbers that he keeps introducing here seem factual to me. And all that we do know about Kamala Harris, his father, is that he is and was a radical communist. Like, that is a fact. It is not a fact that they can step aside from. He was very involved in the early communist movement. And so that should be of interest to people. And here's my question. If you're watching this and you are a committed Kamala voter, my genuine question would be, if you found out that she essentially lied about her entire background and she stole somebody else's like grandmother and pretended that this was her grandmother, would you change your mind about Kamala Harris? Or are we so committed and so into our other camps that it wouldn't really matter to you because you just are like, you know what, I just could never see myself voting for a conservative. And so I'd rather have someone who's, conveniently pretending to be Black all of a sudden. I just find that to be very strange. And I'm not discounting the fact that her father's from Jamaica. I think he is obviously very much from Jamaica. I'm just wondering a little bit more about him because I do find these elements to be a bit strange. I don't think it's a normal thing unless somebody in the chat is going to tell me that it also maybe is a cultural thing that people on the island of Jamaica refer to their like mothers and their grandmothers as Miss this and Miss that, because I think in America that would be quite weird. And also in other countries that would be quite weird. It would be quite formal, but I'm happy to dive in and to read some of your comments. Kamala, I am just asking questions. As I say, I'm just asking questions and I have a lot of them right now, particularly again, honing in on her father. Oh, I forgot to tell you. So because I got interested in her father and we just sort of began this dive today, he also mentions that he fought really hard for her and there was like a long custody battle between him and Kamala's mother, who he was married to before they got divorced. And I did try to locate those records. He put the date here as 1972. And he also put the courts that they were fighting in California. And we couldn't find anything. Actually, I'm going to let my director, you're going to hear like a random male voice here. But Mark, you were the one that was looking this up. What did you not find? I guess, where were we looking when we were looking for these divorce proceedings, if you will, custody disputes?
So the family court for Oakland, California would be the Alameda County Superior Court. So I searched the family law records for Donald Harris for that time period. I found a couple from 1974, 1976, but nothing from 1972. And the cases I did find in 1974 and 76 were totally unrelated parties.
Okay. Yeah. So we did take a look through there. I called my lawyer and asked him because, listen, we're exploring every possibility. Like, it was the 1970s and sometimes they just don't digitize certain cases. I asked him, is it possible to get like a divorce record or a custodial dispute expunged? He said, no, you can get it sealed, but not expunged. But there's a chance that they just didn't upload it. And obviously, to be fair, Kamala Harris also had a lot of power in California. And so maybe there was a way that she got that removed from the public domain, but we are going to keep looking for that because I just now want to verify everything that Donald J. Harris has said, because he's now very much on my radar as someone that has like sort of confirmed her story. So we're going to stay on it because I just think it's really important for us to know who it is that we're electing into office. And I also want to say this, guys, like, for what it's worth, I was not politically awake at the time that Barack Obama went into office. I was one of those people. I did not vote for Barack Obama, but I do very vividly recall the night that he won. I remember staying in my rented place when I was in college and like tears brimming on my eyes because I was like, yes, yes, we can, and whatever his expression was. And I thought that it was going to be this huge difference. And I do remember that people were saying that he was born in Kenya and that was being spun as racist. And then like very many years later, I saw an old document where like it was actually, they pulled that from what he wrote about himself in I think it was like his Harvard yearbook, I don't know, but there was something there. There was definitely something there. And it was something that I think people would have had explored, wish that they had explored more or looked further into. Like, again, I don't know too much about it because I've just vaguely touched it. But I do think it's important that we hold our politicians to a higher standard. Do you know what I mean? And for me, the reason why something like this matters and why I want to know everything about her is because we have already watched Kamala completely switch her character wherever she is. Like, she totally is a chameleon. Like, we've seen her do this sort of Spanish accent. We've seen her do when she's in front of a black crowd. Suddenly she's like in these streets. It makes me very uncomfortable when someone is so comfortable becoming an entirely different person, depending on what crowd they're in front of. Like, you don't have to do that. And if you're doing it, it means that you are willing to be inauthentic to get to where you want to go in life. You're not yourself, right? You're just somebody that puts on a mask and says, what room am I stepping into? And what do I have to sell myself as? That is quite literally not someone that you want to have in office. In fact, it's quite sinister. And if there's anything to this, and like I said, people are sending me all sorts of stuff.
Here's what Judge Joe Brown had to say about that as well.
And I say this after 50 years of experience. The worst human beings you will ever find are career prosecutors. Something slimy about them. They are so turned off by humanity and everything else. They don't care. They're trying to win the game. It is just play to them. They don't give a damn about the people they represent. They just want to win. So they lie, cheat, steal to win the game.
But I just think that if there's any piece of this that we can verify is a lie, then her entire run needs to be called into question. If you have the audacity to put into a book that somebody is your grandmother that potentially is dead, and I think it's a very high potential that this woman died young, given the fact that Donald Harris just completely does not mention Beryl at all, outside of one sentence in an entire essay that he wrote about his heritage. And he wrote this essay again because he wanted to sell to the public that he was Black, which is the reason that he's including this Creole that you guys have now informed me about. The reason that he's including that again is because, just like you got upset in the chat, like, this is Creole. He wants, this is the reaction they want. Do you know what I mean? Like, they want you to be like, remember your tribe. You know what I mean? They're leaning into this because it's a motive. And it's emotive, and it's also a motive for them. And their motive here is to get people to invest in her emotionally. And that is why they snapped on Janet Jackson when she asked a very relevant question. It is of interest that despite the fact that we can say factually she is majority white, okay? She's majority white, no matter which way you slice it. This woman is majority white. He failed to mention any white influence in his life. There was nobody of white influence in his life, no relatives of white influence in his life. I find that to be very strange. Kamala, her entire career, spoke about her Indian heritage. And she looks Indian. She looks like an Indian woman to me. That's totally fine. I don't have an issue with that. But now we're code switching and we're leaning into Creole. And we're leaning into Spanish when we're in a Spanish crowd. Something's not right here. And I'm telling you, these types of people are dangerous. Okay. Now, you people got upset when JD Vance said you don't want these women to be in office who have no children. There's something to that. Okay. There is a lack of compassion. There is a willingness to do anything to get to and to stay where you are at. Right. There's a lack of compassion when it comes to a woman that is so hell bent on getting to office that she will wear any character.
The plot gets thicker. Whoa. Shout out to Candace Owens. If you want to check out that full episode, I'll place a link for the description of that in the description below. This is getting very, very interesting. And Candace Owens brings up a very good point. If she is willing to chameleonize herself in front of whatever demographic she is in front of in order to stay in power, what else is this woman capable of? Shout out to everybody watching. Drop your comments down below. Smash the like button, share, subscribe. And as always, I'll catch you on the next one.